This episode's made possible by Planful. Hello and welcome to Planning Aces. On today's show, we'll be featuring FP&A insights and commentary of three finance leaders, including CFO Doug Lindroth of Telium, CFO Lauren St. Clair of NerdWallet, and CFO Charlie Kevers of Carta. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, along with performance management guru Brett Knowles, who will serve as our co-host and resident thought leader as we seek to highlight the takeaways from our distinguished group of Planning Aces. Brett Knowles joins us after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
Hi, it's Jack Sweeney, and I'm here with Brett Knowles. We've been having an interesting discussion, Brett, you and I, about the one-year anniversary of ChatGPT being released to the masses, or I don't know. Is it a birthday? Is it a birthday celebration? I don't know. I would suspect our listeners are somewhat divided.
And I think every call we have going forward is going to mention AI, because imagine, I don't know, when spreadsheets first came out and then you promised you weren't going to talk about spreadsheets. How could you not? It's such a productivity tool. Or, when smartphones came out, but I'm not going to talk about smartphones. Like, AI's come out. It has huge impact on every aspect of FP&A, and we can't possibly ignore it. We'd be a Luddite if we didn't explore what AI means, even if the people speaking don't bring it up. In other words, you could bring forward an interview you did 5 years ago before people were worried about AI, and still do an AI overlay on those things. Like, what would this person say differently now, given where AI is? That would be an interesting series of interviews, wouldn't it?
It's funny you mentioned 5 years as a span of time, because when it comes to AI, I look at it in terms of months in our conversations with finance leaders that seem to be more on top of this subject area phenomenon than they were just 30 days ago. And I suspect that's true of the three planning aces we are featuring on this episode.
Let's talk about this topic, what we have for a second. So it seems to me that the theme here is about silo fighting. So getting rid of FP&As being a separate silo, or even getting rid of individual departments only focusing in on their own departmental plans, as opposed to the entire organization.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. That's exactly what these three planning aces together help spotlight very nicely. But let me, just to your point about the 5-year span of time, isn't this a conversation we could have had 5 years ago?
Well, this is almost, again, laying on top of what our conversation is today and what each of these players have added to the table. I've described this as silo busting, and you've just been focusing in on the biggest silo buster out there, AI. My job as a consultant is also being disintermediated by AI, stuff that clients used to look to us to help out with, ChatGPT can do it faster, better, cheaper. So like many other chunks of business, what we think of as consulting 5 years ago is different than what consulting is going to be 5 years from now. So I would have said 5 years ago, our job was to help organizations find the right metrics and get people aligned to it. Now, our job is to more around the alignment than finding the best metrics. Chat's going to help us find the best metrics. Now we've got to figure out, how do I socialize that? How do I help every team take personal ownership of what those metrics are in that shared environment? That's stuff that Chat cannot do. I'll give you an example, and I don't know if you can use this or not, but when we've got a metric that turns red, let's say we're doing an FP&A review and our sales number is red, we ask organizations to write 3 sentences of analysis. What? So what? Now what? What happened that made it turn red? And don't give me more data. Explain what happened, right? And that, in this case, I'm making stuff up, but we had problems in the Western region and product alpha launch didn't go as expected. That's stuff that the FP&A system might not pick up, the OKR system might not pick up. I need the wisdom of the leader to do that analysis. So what? What is the implication of that sales? And so I need someone to interpret not what being 10% behind on sales means. You can all figure that part out in terms of inventory, free cash flow, and so on. But those specific problems, what does it mean? So in this case, it might mean, we're not going to see the success with product alpha we expected, and we need to pay attention to what's happening in region G, or G is not going to hit their number. So tell me what's happened. Then the last one is, so what? Now what? What are you recommending we do? Now, ChatGPT can do a great job on that last one. I can say my sales are behind, here's the data, give me 10 recommendations, and that's where I get 226. But it can't do the first 2. So as leaders, as consultants, what we need to do is develop that human analysis and synthesis capability that lets us effectively answer what happened and what the implications are of the so what. AI is going to get there eventually, but it's not there now or in the foreseeable future. The now what is where I can use an AI tool to come up with better recommendations than my team can come up with. So that happens to be my job as a consultant, but also all your listeners' jobs as FP&A, because as FP&A, you're basically an internal consultant, and there's no point in you wasting time on stuff that Chat can do on your behalf, and that frees you up to spend more time on where we as FP&A experts add value.
Nice. Thank you, Brett. Forgive me for asking regarding our episode format. Did you like our lineup just before we pull the trigger here?
As usual, I think that the order that you have them in works quite well.
Okay, then. Let's roll. Our first planning ace is Doug Lindroth, CFO of Helium. Now, part of our discussion with Doug on CFO Thought Leader concerned board positions, which he was stepped into rather early in his career, and how his exposure to boards and the types of questions and discussions that they have allowed him to open the door to new opportunities. But here is Doug Lindroth, CFO of Helium.
Because of the availability of data, a big project that we're undertaking here is what we call success metrics. And what this means is our CEO wants the ability both for him to look at every person, every individual contributor, every manager, every leader, and be able to see for their role, what are their key performance indicators? How are we measuring that? How are we tracking that over time? And how are those metrics doing? And so this is a big project because we didn't have that information before, but now we have it. It comes from various systems based on the different function where people work. But it's a great benefit, not just so the CEO can see that, it's so the individual contributor can say, hey, look, here's my KPIs. I understand how my KPIs roll up to my department level KPIs. And my leader of my department can show me how those roll up into the functional area, which then roll up into the corporate and strategic goals. So you get that great connection from individual contributors to managers, leaders, and ultimately, where all of us in the senior leadership team can see how we're doing. There's different aspects to the way we have it. Their individual personal goals are different than the success metrics, but it can be OKRs. And it's really identifying for each role, what are the things that should be measured specifically for that role, understanding how I'm doing relative to somebody that does the same thing. What is the output of that job and how can we measure that? And that gets back to your point of, do you have systems and data available? And we do, and it's not real easy going through role by role and defining what each of those KPIs are. And since this is our first go around at it here at GLIM, I think they may change over time, which is like any metric. It may be useful at a time, but then it loses its value and there's something else that you want to track and measure that's more important. So I think the same thing could happen for the individual contributors, as well as throughout the ranks of our employees. But what I also like about this project that I find really helpful for us, especially as we're thinking about operational efficiency and capital allocation, is it gives us a look at the capacity of an individual and a department. So are they under capacity or are they over capacity? And in the past, a lot of times our capital allocation was based on who's loudest. The squeaky wheel is going to get the head count, but it wasn't objective data. We would review things and say, yeah, we see what you're saying and it makes sense, so we're going to give you a couple more heads. But this really gives us that objective data where we can sit down and say, this is what this department needs and why they need it. This department looks like it's over capacity, so I can get some resources from here to either move over or help fund resources that I need somewhere else and balance things out. The other great benefit of when you have this view and this information at your fingertips is you can really see how, because part of being able to do the KPIs, you have to have very clear definitions of what the role is and what it's doing. And as companies grow, the specialization of what happens within the role. So, in 2014, when I got here, I had people that did fairly broad roles within the finance department. But as we got bigger, that role needed to narrow. Instead of somebody working on billings and collections, now it's somebody working on billings, somebody else working on collections. So they become more focused. But with our success metrics, what we're able to see is where there's role overlap, and it may be in different departments, but we're seeing where it kind of looks like they're doing the same thing. Do we have lack of clarity between those departments on roles and responsibilities? And oftentimes that lack of clarity leads to disagreements on who's doing what, double work, inefficiencies, more internal meetings, less customer facing time. So this has been a good benefit already, even though we're still in, finalizing the first go around of this whole project. But we've already seen that and have really been able to drive efficiencies out and clarify roles and responsibilities. And it's been really good for the employees. It's like, okay, now I understand what they're doing. It's not gray anymore. So it's been very valuable.
That was our first planning ace for this episode, Doug Lindroth, CFO of Telium, talking about, it would be silo busting for certain, a big part of what he exposed to us. But Brett, what did you make of what Doug Lindroth shared?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I think your interesting point to begin with about Doug being on a bunch of boards and actually, getting the boards at a fairly young age. It's interesting because board members, if you think of the overall structure, the board member's job is to look out long term, 5 or 10 years, and make sure we don't sacrifice the long term for the short term. The executive's job is looking out, let's say, 1 to 5 years, the VP's 1 to 5 quarters, and so on. So most people on boards are chosen for their ability to take that long view. What's interesting about Doug's conversation is he's also taking the shortest view possible down to the individual. So his conversation, just to paraphrase it, is how is it we link great metrics together? And the interesting part about his conversation is let's use those metrics to measure how the individual's doing, and that's obviously specific to their roles, their outputs, operational efficiency, and so on. But then he quickly goes on to say, now I can use that same metrics for day-to-day monitoring, for performance conversations with the individual, the team, the department, and also for our needs in FP&A. Well, wouldn't that be interesting? Instead of having 3 different dashboards, one for each of those applications, having one set of data across all of them. And so to link it back to my first comment, as someone who's on boards and a serial CFO, constantly looking long-term, big picture, this conversation is all about him talking short-term, small picture down to the team and individual. So I thought that was an interesting connection of data across applications, performance measurement, performance conversation with employees, and planning, as also those time horizons.
Now, am I right? There was a place in time where, you just wouldn't use KPIs in business for compensation.
The short answer is yes. And that's based largely on the belief that people would game the numbers. If I'm getting compensated for my sales numbers, I'm going to go game those numbers and make them artificially high so I get paid more. And that might have worked back in 1957 when all of our records were kept on paper. But these days, with the abundance of real-time or near real-time data we have, it's virtually impossible for anyone to fudge to game the numbers, right? If I said my sales are high, you'd see it instantly because you can see the sales register. You can see the general ledger. You can see how many orders went into operations. You can see how many, projects operations working on, so on. So there is no longer that opportunity to game the number. And so I think that's an outdated thought where I need to separate my compensation data from the rest of the data. And so, yes, that is the direction that most organizations are going, where it's one book of business, one clear, transparent view that links, in this case, Doug's talking about different silos, my daily performance reporting, my performance conversation with employees, and the planning. They should all be using the same data.
Now, when I listen to him and his choice of words, it's almost as if he's saying this is about forcing clarity on roles and responsibilities.
So this whole FP&A and that clarity has an impact on the HR department and how we set up roles and responsibilities and what that clarity looks like. Now, you can see where that could come a problem. So he's working on a number, and now the question is that owned by sales or is that owned by marketing? Is it owned by operations? And who's responsible for it? So that's what we solve in the HR world through models like RACI or RAPID, the accountability frameworks. But now the planning process that we're talking about here is also inexorably linked to that. And so as he's working through these numbers and getting that clarity of roles and responsibilities, has impact on the organization chart. But he also touched on, but didn't embellish, so I'll take the liberty of doing so, is it begins to uncover what we call overlaps and underlaps. Overlaps is where 2 different teams think they own the same numbers. In other words, if there's a metric that sales thought they owned and marketing thinks they own, it ends up in conflict because both of them are trying to work on that number before the other person does, or both of them are trying to take credit for the benefit before the other one does, and so on. So that's overlap. Underlap is when sales think marketing owns it and marketing thinks sales owns it. In fact, no one owns it and it doesn't get done. So what's interesting about the work he's doing basically around data structures is it triggered thought processes in the organization chart and also in that whole accountability with overlaps and underlaps. And so what he's really doing is making what's invisible in every organization. We all have that conflict. He's making that invisible stuff visible, because when it's visible, we can now work on trying to manage it. So I thought his whole idea of this, one view of the truth has a whole bunch of domino effects. And the most important of which, as far as I'm concerned, is what I call silo fighting. He's getting away from sales owns it or marketing owns it by getting clarity on where that ownership is and how we work together.
Well, permit me to tee up our next planning ace, who will be Lauren St. Clair, CFO of NerdWallet. Nora came up finance accounting ranks at eBay, where her last tour of duty was as CFO of eBay North America. Prior to that, she was international CFO of StubHub, when eBay owned StubHub, that is. But here is Lauren St. Clair, CFO of NerdWallet.
One of the groups that I also have the opportunity to manage is our analytics and business intelligence groups. And those groups can sit in a number of different places. At my time at eBay, I learned pros and cons of those being centralized or decentralized. And so it's important from my perspective to have teams that can be a checks and balance and have a little bit of air cover. And so that way, when they are helping to report out or analyze the business unit that they're supporting, there's no sort of conflict of interest, right? And so I like to provide that air cover. But I do think, to your point about sort of the future of finance and where things are heading, and there's so much information and there's so much data, and being able to better connect the business performance and business analytics with the outcomes on our financial statements, I think is the real power in having those teams combined. And so it's something that we've been talking a lot about internally and really strengthening I would say, the input of those two teams, having them collaborate more, and also providing our business leaders with a single point of contact so that they can understand business performance and then how that connects to the financials in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. The biggest question I ask my FP&A leaders is, one, to think 3 steps ahead and to also be thought partners for the business. So while yes, I would think it's table stakes for our role to be able to consolidate financials and roll up reports, to me, that is not the value add that finance can bring to the table. So it's, hey, as a result of these numbers, here's a recommendation on what we can do to better optimize the business, or let's put more investment dollars here, or hey, we're not getting the results that we expected to out of this initiative. Maybe we pull back a little bit or reallocate resources to something else. And so for me, it's really being a thought partner and coming to the table with the business and having a perspective and a voice. There's 2 metrics I'd call out as something that has started to sort of shift and evolve since I first joined. So monthly unique users is one of the main metrics. We report that every quarter. But as we talk about our journey and our strategic vision for the next, call it 5 years, we really want to be the trusted financial ecosystem that small businesses and consumers turn to learn, to shop, and to manage all of their personal finances. And so for us, we are on a journey to get folks registered, to have people connect more information so that we can provide more robust recommendations and more personalized recommendations at scale. So as a result of that, we are talking a little bit more about registered users. We talked about in Q3, we drove a 38% year-over-year increase in the cumulative number of registered users that we have. So that's one of the metrics that we started talking a little bit more about. The other one, which is a bit more financial related, but a lot of companies of our size and scale tend to use adjusted EBITDA as their main profitability metric. And we started disclosing our version of a non-GAAP operating income. which is very similar to adjusted EBITDA, except we take out stock-based compensation as well as internally developed software costs that were capitalized during the period. And that was important for Tim and I because we hold our managers internally accountable for the full cost of employee compensation, whether that's a cash or non-cash expense. And so we wanted our fellow shareholders to hold us accountable to that same standard. And so that was another new sort of metric financial measure that we started disclosing recently.
So, if there's a moment of excitement in what Lauren said for me, it was when she came up with the term avoiding conflict of interest. And that's incredibly important in the FP&A world because we always think of, conflict of ownership. But what we're really dealing with is about who's interested in what number. And of course, that's kind of like a Venn diagram. For any one number, there's several different departments that are interested in it. So how do I resolve that conflict of interest? I know that all those different departments need to be concerned about it, but how do I manage that? And she did her statement about linking, connecting business performance and analytics, the specific numbers with financial outcomes is a mirror of what Doug said. So, Doug talked about that one data that was used for daily performance, for performance conversations, and for long-term planning. She's saying the same thing. Like, how is it we connect those things together and sort of become a thought partner as we work in this world, the FP&A world, with planning around each of those elements. So I thought that conflict of interest as opposed to conflict of ownership was a really important concept that we all need to begin dealing with. And that is back to what I heard from Doug, which is silo fighting. How do we get away from people feeling that it's their silo, they own that thing, to I have interest in it and I want to be a thought partner in how we talk about it?
Well, from one organization to the next, the conflict could be different, one would imagine. But what are some of the more common ones that you've observed?
Well, that is actually a great question. And I shouldn't say it like that because that sounds like the other ones aren't that great. But that's a great question. To rephrase it, one of the things that we often see is the department that presents the data often thinks they own it. So, for example, we use the common example of sales revenue. We often think that sales owns that piece of data just because they're the ones that report it. The dilemma is, as we know with sales, a whole bunch of departments have to work in conjunction for that number to work. Marketing's got to be there to condition the marketplace and get it ready for it. Sales has to actually go in there and do stuff. Operations has to give clear information about what capacity they have to support new customers, new products, product engineering development, whatever your organization might need. And that's what Lauren talks about, that journey towards connect and connected data, to understand that just because you're reporting the data doesn't mean you own it. It doesn't mean you necessarily own the process. It doesn't mean you own all the support mechanisms, which is where she plugs in the concept of thought partners around that data. Now, in her example, we think about it, I hear that and I think about it in the FP&A world. Like, how is it we connect the data so as we do the plan, we understand all the elements that have to happen to achieve that sales number. In her case, she takes it one step further beyond what our scope is here. And that is, because they support consumers and individuals in their investment activities, they use that connected data to provide better customer information and better customer recommendations. So what does that look like? And on a surface level, we think about it on the investment side of what's someone's risk interest, and so that I choose the appropriate investments at the appropriate risk level. But there's other dimensionalities to how we invest. It could be, I only want to invest in countries or companies with a certain regional expertise, or companies that don't do business with someone, Russia or, whoever it might be. Or I only want investments that have long-term, short-term, and so on. So her journey to connected data helps us in the FP&A world, but the same connection of data should help in your execution of your strategy in day-to-day operations.
Well, we're intrigued by your phrase connected data. What would be an example of connected data?
Well, she actually gave us 3 examples, which I think are interesting. So she spent a bit of time talking about her non-GAAP operating income, which she likens to what other people are doing with adjusted EBITDA. The net is that's an overarching indicator metric that all teams have to align on in order to achieve that number. Now, part of the dilemma there, especially in the FP&A world, is I'm looking at financial data, and therefore, whether it's GAAP or not GAAP, non-GAAP, we're still limited by what the financial system will capture. And the example I would give is this podcast. You deliver this podcast for free. That doesn't mean it doesn't add any value. So when I look at non-GAAP operating income, I'm still looking at dollarized stuff, and therefore it's exclusive. But she gave us 2 other interesting examples. One was monthly unique users. So the reason that's connected data is you could imagine a whole bunch of things need to work in sync in order to increase the number of monthly unique users. And the second, I don't know how she measures it, but was the trusted financial ecosystem. And I don't know what the metric is, but if we pretend we have one, again, there's a whole bunch of things I need to do to be that trusted financial ecosystem. It's got to be an ecosystem, it's got to be financial, and more importantly, it's got to be trusted. So those are examples of connected data where they overarch a number of different departments. They're not based in currency. You could see where I could use them, as Doug talked about, in daily reports if you had that cadence, but certainly in performance conversations with individuals, and unquestionably powerful in the FP&A world.
Well, Brett, I know you enjoyed our discussion with CFO Charlie Kevers of Carta from episode 933 on CFO Thought Leader. I wanted to make certain we included Charlie on this episode as well. He had quite a few thoughts regarding metrics and visibility into the organization. Here's what Charlie shared with us.
It's funny because in the early days, I saw them move a lot faster and even putting analysis together, because they're like, oh, I just asked ChatGPT how to do this, and I don't have to figure it out by myself or ask somebody. It was solved in 2 minutes. And so surprisingly, even basic things like this accelerated them, especially all the junior folks on the team are doing an even faster job in going through complex analysis or data analysis to be able to understand how to do it. We are working on, from a planning standpoint, how can we use AI? The challenge there is always, it works if your data is really clean. And given we change a lot, we create new products, there's a lot of movement in our data. It's in a good spot, but we're trying to be thoughtful around how we can now put an AI engine on top of that. We are leveraging in some of the tools that we have, the ability to do reporting by just asking, show me XYZ or this time period. So it's not as manual to pull information. So a lot of it where we're starting is just trying to simplify or automate existing processes. We're not trying to recreate anything different. No, it's just how do we make a lot of the manual process that still exists, and the team's done a phenomenal job automating things over time, but manual process still exists. How do we address that? So then we first start with everybody spending time on more complex topics and engaging even more deeply with their business partners. So that's where we spend most of our time, is how can we use this new technology to kind of remove any manual or human interactions. I don't necessarily expect my ERP to be AI ready, as long as they provide us the ability, and they are, to structure data in such a way that then we can run models on it on the back end, right? Where we spend most of our time is, let's make sure we record transactions in a way, and then we can use them from a planning standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint with our business partners, and that's where we would apply AI. And the platform we use for those types of use cases, yes, is very much working on AI and has very clear use cases they want to solve. So I think it depends on the technology partners. There are some where we want them to, and for the most part they are. And there are some where I don't think it matters that much, or even if they do, I don't know that it changes our behavior. So we're also trying to be focused enough on where we do it versus having people too distracted. So to me, it was learning the value of transparency and coming from, as we discussed, mostly public companies through my earlier career in finance roles. I've been trained that you can't talk about this. Like, this is just material, non-public information. And so generally keeping things relatively close to the vest in terms of finance information, and coming to Carta, the company was already quite transparent. We were still figuring out what to talk about from a finance standpoint, but the learning of, once you make that information available and clearly explain what it means, as to why we care about gross margin, why we care about net dollar retention, why we care about sales efficiency, all these metrics that we track. I've always been positively surprised on how much people care about them and how much they take ownership, and then identifying ways to improve these metrics in their respective areas. Even most recently, we've started to talk a lot more about how do we think about profitability and cost. And of course, in this environment, once again, we've been very transparent. Here's where we spend our money. Here are the things we want to work on. And then everybody came back with opportunities to save costs. There's a side of me that was like, why didn't you tell me earlier? But again, it comes back to as long as you're transparent and explain what you're trying to deal with, it really helps drive productive discussions between finance and the rest of the business. And then related to that, we did a lot of work over the last couple of years to actually break down our business to have a P&L by product area, really top to bottom. Like, so here's the revenue, here's the gross margin, here's how much sales and marketing we're putting behind it, here's how much R&D we're putting behind it. That completely transformed the internal discussions and the discussions with our board, which means we can actually look at what's the rule of 40 for every one of our product areas. What's the profitability profile? How do we think about relative investments? And so the trade-off discussions you're having, the discussions can be more in depth in the boardroom around, like, well, how do we think about investing more in this business versus that business? Here's the growth profile of this one. Here's the unit economics of that one. Because all our businesses have slightly different profiles. That was, I will forever continue to do that. As difficult as it is for the finance team to put this together, because it was a big endeavor to really structure everything in a way where we can do this automatically, but well worth the investment, because now it continues to drive really, really useful discussions and productive discussions on understanding what each decision will mean for different product areas.
Well, thank you to CFO Charlie Kevers for shedding some light on how his organization is exploring how to bring AI into the planning process. Brett, what did you make of what Charlie shared?
Well, so to back into it, the interesting thing that links to this silo busting conversation we're having is beginning to consider AI to be just another person at the FP&A table. So think of ChatGPT as being someone who signed an NDA, and I'll talk about that in a second, but comes to the table not with a career of 30 years of experience, but rather 300 years of experience and knowledge from outside the business as well as inside the business. And so it's an interesting conversation, and he sort of reflects that with a couple of things, like we're just making our manual processes better. We're not doing new stuff. We're just making what we do faster, better, cheaper, which has a direct impact on the organization chart. And when you begin to do some of these more menial tasks through AI, the organization chart changes so that some of those menial tasks are taken away And I can use that same person to do higher level thinking. So there's a lot of stuff that AI doesn't do, but if I can offload some of the administrative stuff onto ChatGPT, good things happen. Now, he sort of made a distinction that said that they're not a technology company, which I think is incorrect. I think these days, every single company is a technology company. There's no company that's going to survive, even if you're manufacturing buggy whips, that is not technologically enabled at this point in time. So your Chat GPT is just another element of being a technology company. Yes, you have to have clean data. Then he goes on to talk about the value of transparency and how in the good old days, you used to keep your numbers close to your vest and you were told not to share particular data and so forth. So what's interesting is as we go to tools like Chat, they do require a higher degree of transparency in order for it to give you better answers, garbage in, garbage out. So that's sort of a quick tour of what I heard him say. The part I want to touch on that you could, phrase up a question later for Jack is around security. So the issue with FP&A is there's a whole bunch of data that we play with that's top secret that we don't want anyone else to know. And it might not be anyone else in the organization. It might be, I just don't want people outside the organization getting access to it. Regardless, the data we use is mission critical, and we don't want, our evil competitors to get to it. And the dilemma with using tools like ChatGPT is when you share with it your organization's information, that information becomes part of its learning mechanism. In other words, it becomes available to the internet. And if someone else asks a related question, some of that information you've shared with it can easily show up. And so as we begin thinking about AI in the FP&A world, we need to be very conscious of security. Now, the trick here to learn about security in the FP&A world is take a look at what Microsoft is doing with Copilot. They've got the best mindset about security that we're seeing out there. And why is it? Because Microsoft has always been concerned about security from the beginning. So in their tool Copilot, which is their version of ChatGPT, they include your SSO, your single sign-on structures in your organization, which means as a user, if you could not get access to particular data, let's say salary, even in this Copilot world, you still can't get access to it. So it doesn't matter if it's part of the FP&A model or not. The Copilot tool will make sure you don't get access to the data in any way, shape, or form. The other thing it does is it protects your data and keeps it on your side of the firewall. So I can use real live spreadsheets and Anaplan data and whatever I'm using without fear about it going on to the internet. If you're using chat, you don't have that opportunity unless you mask your data and so forth. So security is going to become super important to us in FP&A, especially if you're using AI tools.
Just want to mention again or highlight that it has been a year since chat arrived and this generative AI tool arrived and has begun to be used widely. And for those finance professionals who might have first experimented with it last January, to go back to this tool, it always seems to be, and of course, we're a little smarter about how to use it, but it also always seems to be a little more muscular, a little more powerful. And do you agree? I mean, it's a common experience that we're talking to people about all the time. We're all experiencing this.
No, I agree. And it does relate to what Charlie talks to us about. So, he talks about once that information is available, once I've got that transparency, what we used to call open book management. He said, it's amazing how much people care. And so, and that's related to his comment he said about, we used to keep this data close to our vest. In the good old days, we had these hierarchies where the CEO and VPs got to see all sorts of important information and no one else got to see it. What did that mean? It meant the corporation was running on a dozen brains. With the transparency that we now expect in organizations, that same organization is not dependent on a dozen brains, but probably 10 dozen brains or more. What GPT and AI brings to the table is now it's not even 10 dozen brains. It's 10 dozen 100 brains or something. Like, you have just such powerful information coming. When we take a look at some of our clients in the FP&A world, when we ask ChatGPT or Copilot questions, we get back what we typically call 226. So we say, let's do a plan for this department. Give me 10 ideas of what that plan could look like. Copilot comes back with 2 ideas which we already thought about, 2 ideas which we could not possibly execute in this organization, and 6 ideas that are brilliant. We can't execute them the way that Copilot suggests, but they give us creative ideas that we don't have the experience or the wisdom to come up with. They come from other industries, other situations, but they're brilliant and they give us a huge differentiator and competitive advantage. So 2, 2, 6, 2 ideas we had, 2 boneheaded ideas, 6 ones that are worth considering. Well, how much money would you spend to get those 6 ideas? And to get those 6 ideas at every level of the organization, every department, every concept, whether I'm looking at a region, a product, a process, it's invaluable. So that wisdom is not going to go away. To speak to what you've described, we're now seeing it more like 118. One idea we've come up with, one idea that's crazy, 9 or 8 ideas which are brilliant and worth considering. So our experience is, yes, these tools are getting smarter, partly because they learn what we're interested in and what we drill deeper into within our organization. That's a Copilot issue. But also, if I'm still using chat in their broader context, what more people are asking questions about. So I think it's driving many of the concepts, Jack, that you and I have been talking about. It's driving the transparency, driving people being interested. We're actually seeing, when we begin running these FP&A sessions with clients, they're coming to the meetings far smarter. Why? Because they've done their homework. They've been using chat and they're landing with processed ideas, not raw data.
Nice. Well, never fear, listeners. We have another episode coming out for you before the end of the year. But it is that holiday time of year. Brett, are you going to be around? Are you?
Yeah, we'll be around, but it looks like I'm going to be collecting a whole bunch of airline points going forward. AI and other things are causing business to leap forward right now. So it is the feeding frenzy, the planning period at the end of the year. But also we've got these more powerful planning tools that we know if we don't take advantage of them, our evil competitors are. So there's a tremendous learning curve going on in all organizations. And we realize we cannot postpone this till next year when we have a new budget to draw on. So we're seeing a lot of high interest in a better focus of our businesses going forward. So it's going to be very busy times for all of us going forward.
Wow. Well, the times, they are a-changing. Brett, thank you for allowing us to catch up with you. And as always, listeners, thank you for listening. We plan to drop another episode, as mentioned, before the end of the year. For Planning Aces, this has been Jack Sweeney with Brett Knowles.